So it's time for a little spa therapy for this Monstera Deliciosa. This is a Monstera that I had first in my place in Brooklyn, and I brought it up pretty early on up to here at Flock in the upstate New York. And I don't know about you, but anybody in the comments, if you and your plants have lived through a long renovation, let me know, because my plants lived through a renovation that took maybe 5 or 6 years in Brooklyn, and I had all my plants that were in the windows on my tables in the center of my place. And you know, when you have a landlord, sometimes those renovations take a lot longer than you'd want. Now we're doing our own renovations and living in renovations, and so are the plants. So I want to show you that this Monstera has seen better days, and now that it's warm out, or warm-ish, I am taking out some of these plants, especially the big ones, outside so that we could do better renovations. And like, if you look at these leaves, this is all drywall dust that's on these leaves. So I brought the hose over. I'm going to give it a nice hose down, and I'm probably going to put this into Peepo and Tutu's coop. So if you've ever missed that episode, I have 2 rescue diamond doves, Peepo and Tutu. They are adorable. They like to nest in my plants, and they obviously like to sit on the plants. In fact, I think there's probably poop on the plant here from Peepo and Tutu, because they were in the house with this plant for a while. But it never got potted up. You can see some of the aerial roots grabbing on here, so let me bring that out. I probably won't keep it in this basket. You can see there's holes in the basket. I probably won't keep it in this basket, and there's also sunflower seeds, probably from a chipmunk. And the reason why I won't keep this in the basket with Peepo and Tutu is because one time, they're really tiny doves. They're like the size of like my middle finger. The smallest doves in the world. So I had this in here at one point, and I couldn't find Tutu. She was in between, stuck between. It took me like 2 days to find her. She was stuck between this, and she doesn't like make any noise. So I had to literally go through every part of my house trying to find her. So I've learned my lesson. I'll either keep it in its original pot if it doesn't need repotting, or maybe I'll put it in this kind of pot. But first thing I want to do is just take out some of these old dead bits. And now we have hard water here, and you could decide whether you want to give your plant like a full on spa treatment with like distilled or reverse osmosis water, or something of that nature. I'm not going to do that because it's not necessarily available to me, and this is a very large plant, and that would require quite a lot of water. So I'm just going to use a hose and spray it off. But just keep in mind that if you're using just your regular city or tap water and it has minerals in it, then it might leave stains. In fact, when I do a lot of the Florida nursery tours or in people's homes, and oftentimes in Florida, it was kind of weird. It almost looks like an oil slick on top of some of the leaves. And it's just what their water is. It has probably certain types of chemicals or salts in it that leave this kind of almost, it almost looks like a Microsorum thailandicum, like those leaves that have their iridoplasts that make it have this kind of sheen to it, but it's just the water. So I want to be able to clear off this dust, because with any type of water that I have, and I don't think the minerals are going to hurt it too much. But right now, if you cover up the leaves with all this dust, you're diminishing the opportunity for this plant to make food for itself, because you're almost putting a sunscreen on it, to be perfectly frank. A lot of plants will develop this kind of white or verdigris or bluish sheen on their leaves in order to protect themselves from the sun, especially if they're out in the sun a lot. But in this case, this leaf wants to get bigger and bigger, greener, to be able to accept more of that light into the chlorophyll of its leaves. So, some aerial roots I showed you starting. And in nature, these are, once this finds a tree to grow up on, so I could potentially stake it and have it grow up and its leaves will get bigger. But once it finds a tree to grow up on, these will plug themselves into the moss or the soil below, and that will kind of stake it to the earth so that it kind of holds it to the earth while this starts to grow upwards. Now, I'm not gonna stake it up because this will inevitably probably not end up in Peepo and Tutu's room. I might choose to do some other things with it. We're planning on doing like a green wall as well. So potentially taking some cuttings of this and putting some of these into the green wall. I just want to have a little bit more flexibility. And if I start putting it up on a stake, then that's kind of where it's going to be for a while. I'd hate to actually have to cut it off from the stake that it's going to be on. Really nice, well-draining soil. And I've seen these plants in tiny pots. This is actually a tinier pot than this one. So I'll have to see if I could shove it in there. And if not, I just don't have anything bigger, to be perfectly frank. So before I do anything, I'm going to bring over the hose. So let's just do this. And I might take my gloves off because these are I'm gonna get really wet here. See how good this drywall dust kind of sticks to this leaf. But this is a long time coming. I mean, this has been, I don't know, how long has this been in drywall dust? 6 months? 7? Yeah, I've lost count. So I have moved this outside, and I could probably keep this outside. I'm not putting it in super direct sun. We had this facing kind of a south-facing window inside, but you'd be surprised, like full sun outside is definitely even not full sun. Full sun inside is not full sun outside. Full sun outside could be really intense if you've had it in full sun inside. So I still keep this relatively protected because you could still get damage. It takes approximately 2 weeks for the chlorophyll molecules to readjust themselves. And oftentimes, like if you bring a plant that was in full sun and you're pulling it into like low light in your house, that it loses some of its leaves. And until it has new growth, that new growth is not gonna, it's only that new growth that's gonna be accustomed to that lower light condition. So that's why people freak out when they have their plants that they bought from a nice nursery looking super stellar, and then they bring in and they put it in like a little north corner of their house and all the leaves start falling off. Usually those plants could pull through, but you want to, quote unquote, what they call harden them off. So give them a little less humidity, a little less light than what they had in the nursery. And usually the nurseries are responsible in doing that, but not all nurseries do that, unfortunately. They just like look to get them out the door. So let me give you an example. Right here, now this could be some type of thrips damage or spider mites damage. You could see that the chlorophyll is gone right here, or it could potentially be that it was too much light in an area. This to me looks a little bit more thrips damaged, but that would be my opinion on it. So let's see how this does with a little wetness. I mean, that already looks a lot better. Now I'm gonna fertilize it. So I'm just gonna use a really gentle organic fertilizer. This is Espoma's indoor houseplant food. It's 222, so N, P, and K, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium.
It's Tutu?
It's Tutu, like my little bud. Really gentle. You could go with a synthetic fertilizer if you'd like, but a lot of times synthetic fertilizers are 10-10-10 or 20-20-20, and I like to water those down a little bit more. Now, if you're working with like plants where you're trying to get some nice rhizobia or good bacteria in the soil, the microbiome of the soil, if you will, oftentimes the synthetic fertilizers could suppress that helpful microbiome. Now that this plant is going to be hybrid indoor-outdoor, I might have this with a little compost even adding on top. Probably really like that and keep it outdoors for a bit. Now the downsides of keeping it outdoors, as you saw in the basket, I had like chipmunk sunflower seeds and everything. You might bring in like millipedes, earthworms, things that just get into the soil. The chipmunk might bury some sunflowers in the soil. I'll definitely have had that happen. And you have to remember to bring it in if you ever have a cold snap, or even if you have a ton of rain and it's gonna knock the soil out, or if you're gonna have like oppressively hot days and it's directly in the sun, you wanna still be able to protect your plant. And I'm sometimes bad at this, but when it starts to get a little cooler and you don't have space in the house or you're still renovating and you're like, oh, I could just push it one more week and then it gets a cold chill. It could be fully damaging to the plant and you might not be able to get it back. So I'm just gonna see if I could pull this out a little bit. I might not be able to. Let me put these on. And of course, if I wanted to separate this, I could also cut it. Oh, this one is firmly rooted in here, and I think that's because, look at all the roots down here. So I might wait, I might actually even wait to plant this up because look at the roots, they're coming out. I feel like I need to invest in a bigger pot for this plant. All right, so Sandra reminded me that I have some more pots up top. So I have this blue one, which is really pretty, kind of like a robin eggs blue. But even though it's tall, it's not as wide. And then I have this one, which is essentially like the same size as this. And the problem with this one is it doesn't have a drainage in the bottom. So this is more like a cashpo, which is just a fancy name for a decorative planter. So what I think I'm gonna do is like cop out on this. I'm not gonna totally replant it. What I'm gonna do is root prune some of these on the bottom. And just so they don't circle around too much. And then once I have a larger pot, I'll basically repot this. But for right now, I'm gonna just top dress it with some new soil and just do some root pruning. And these roots will grow back. I'm not gonna restrict them too much, but at least I won't have to put like a planter bottom here because the cashpo will essentially be the area to catch the extra draining water. See how that fits right in there? And there's no gap between the cashpo and the plastic planter that Peepo or Tutu could get caught up in. Now, I think what I'm going to do is just add a little layer of potting medium to the top, just because like over time, the potting medium sinks down, or if you're watering, sometimes it kind of sprays out if you're watering it too much, if you have like too heavy hand of watering. And I'll just water it in once again and use this. So, you know, sometimes I think I'm gonna be repotting this. I just wanted to be prepared for everything. And then look, I just didn't have I didn't think I had big enough planters, but I do to just fit it in again. But I think I wanna go one size up. Even when I went to the Missouri Botanical Garden Tour, you'd see some of these plants, ZZs, monsteras, they're growing in tiny, tiny little pots. And they are these huge monster plants. So what that has taught me is that sometimes plants don't mind actually being root bound, provided you're giving them the right conditions, like nice high humidity, good fertilizer. If you give them a place to grow up on, they'll start to grow up and out. And aerial roots, these can be a problem in some cases. One of my first monsteras that I had in Brooklyn, it put out so many aerial roots, and my place in Brooklyn is like old, has a lot of cracks and crevices. They started to grow down underneath the foundation of my floor, into the wall. It was a bit of a problem, kind of was happening. And I like to let my plants kind of go and do their thing, but I was like, this could be a structural issue. So I had to like chop that plant pretty heavily and get rid of it really early on. I'm talking about like maybe like 15, 16 years ago. It was one of my originals, and I just had it in a small planter on my south-facing windowsill. I think there's probably still aerial roots in the walls somewhere. All right, I'm gonna give this one more last kind of wash down because I'm still seeing some of that drywall dust. And you can make your own like homemade leaf shine. Sometimes even just using like a dishwashing, like a gentle dishwashing soap, just a little squeeze of that in with water and taking a sponge and washing each individual leaf off. I mean, we've done plant tours where people use a mixture of like mayonnaise and water. I mean, I'm sure there's lots of folks who have their own homemade leaf shines that do extremely well. But I'm gonna keep it simple. We're gonna get rain in a couple more days, so probably nothing's better than a good rainwater. So I'll bring this outside on the patio and let it get a good rain and then assess the leaves afterwards. But I think we're gonna be ready for spring and summer. A little fertilizer, a little top dressing, at least some new digs for a while until we could get a larger pot. And then I'll be moving this into Peepo and Tutu's coop. So stay tuned. I'll be doing a lot more maintenance videos with all the plants that I have bringing up from Brooklyn, and some of them, like this one, are a little bit more forlorn because of the renovation dramas. But yeah, let me know in the comments below if you've lived through renovations with your plants. Obviously moving plants is a big deal. And if you have tips for myself or for other folks, leave them in the comment section, because I think that will give a lot of information for people. Thanks for watching here on Plant One On Me. There's more to come, and I'll see you later. Bye. Stay tuned here for more progress, plant tips, tours, and plant-filled hangout sessions here on Plant One On Me. And if you have a second, hit the like, subscribe, and notifications button to share your love for the channel. That helps us grow and share our videos to more folks like you. And if you want a deeper understanding of plants, head over to homesteadbrooklyn.com to check out all of our online houseplant courses and offerings, from the 125 houseplant care spreadsheet to the Houseplant Masterclass. And we'll see you in the next episode.